Ryan Holton's calloused hands gripped the wrench tighter as he heard the familiar sound of tires crunching gravel outside his garage. Through the open bay door, he watched Mrs. Parker's Mercedes roll to a stop, its engine making that distinct rattling noise he'd warned her about 3 months ago. "I should have listened to you sooner, Ryan," she said, stepping out in her high heels. "Think you can fix it? Depends on how long you ignored the problem." His voice carried no judgment, just facts. He wiped his hands on a rag and approached the vehicle, then popped the hood. As he inspected the engine, his mind wandered to the day Melissa had first pulled into this same spot, her old Honda spewing smoke. She'd worn a simple sundress then, nothing like the expensive clothes she paraded around in now at Daniel Mercer's mansion. "How bad is it?" Mrs. Parker's voice pulled him back to the present. "Timing belt shot. Could have seized your engine." He straightened up. 800, parts and labor. "I'll have it done by tomorrow afternoon." "That's half what the dealership quoted me." She smiled, relief evident in her voice. "I don't believe in overcharging." Ryan grabbed his clipboard. "Just honest work for honest pay." As Mrs. Parker signed the paperwork, the bell above the office door chimed. Milo, Ryan's German shepherd, lifted his head from his bed in the corner, but remained silent, recognizing the visitor. "Hey, Ryan." Peter Harmon's familiar bulk filled the doorway. "Got a minute?" Ryan nodded to Mrs. Parker as she left, then turned to his friend. "What's on your mind?" Peter shifted uncomfortably, pulling an envelope from his jacket. "This came to the hardware store by mistake. Well, you should see for yourself." Ryan took the envelope, his expression hardening as he recognized the expensive paper and flowing script. Inside was an invitation to Melissa and Daniel's wedding, complete with a handwritten note. "You deserve to see what you lost." The paper crumpled in his grip. She always did have a mean streak. "You're not actually thinking of going." Peter leaned against the counter, concern etched on his weathered face. "You know something." It wasn't a question. Ryan had known Peter since high school. He could read his tells. Peter ran a hand through his graying hair. "I've been meaning to tell you. I saw her last week behind Grant's bar. She wasn't alone." "Daniel? Aaron Grant himself?" Ryan asked, narrowing his eyes. Peter pulled out his phone, showing Ryan several photos. They looked intimate. Ryan studied the images. Melissa pressed against the bar's back wall. Aaron's hands where they shouldn't be, their faces close enough to share breath. "How long have you been watching them?" "About a month. Started noticing patterns. She goes there Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, always leaves before sunset." Ryan's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. "Keep the photos. I might need them." "Ryan." Peter hesitated. "What are you planning?" "Nothing yet." He turned back to Mrs. Parker's Mercedes, grabbing his tools. But Melissa always wanted to be the center of attention. Maybe it's time to give her what she wants. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of oil changes and brake jobs. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Ryan locked up the garage and headed home, Milo trotting faithfully beside him. Their house sat on the outskirts of Evergreen Hills. Nothing fancy, just a simple ranch-style home with good bones and a solid foundation, unlike the mansion Melissa now called home. He remembered the day she'd left, her cruel words echoing in their kitchen. "I'm suffocating here, Ryan. You're so content with this mediocrity. Don't you want more from life?" "I want honest things," he replied. "Things I've earned." "Well, I want more, and Daniel can give it to me." Now, 2 years later, Ryan sat on his porch, nursing a beer as Milo sprawled at his feet. The invitation lay on the table beside him, its elegant paper catching the last light of day. In the distance, he could see the lights of Daniel's mansion on the hill, glittering like a false promise. His phone buzzed. Peter again. "You're not going to believe this," his friend's voice crackled through the speaker. "Guess who just walked into Grant's bar?" "Melissa. And Daniel just arrived. They're all in there. Melissa, Aaron, and the man she's supposed to marry." A cold smile crossed Ryan's face. Keep watching. I want to know every move they make. What are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time Evergreen Hills learned what happens when you try to bury the truth. Ryan finished his beer. And what happens when you betray the wrong person? The conversation ended, but Ryan's mind raced with possibilities. He'd built his life on patience and precision. Fixing cars required both. Now he'd use those same skills to dismantle the web of lies Melissa had woven around herself. Inside, he pulled out an old lockbox from under his bed. It contained memories from his marriage, photos, letters, and something else. A small notebook filled with details about Melissa's past indiscretions. He'd started keeping records near the end, when suspicion had replaced trust. Back then, he told himself it was paranoia. Now he knew better. Milo whined softly, sensing his master's dark mood. It's all right, boy. Ryan scratched behind the dog's ears. We're just getting started. He spent the next hour making calls, reaching out to old contacts who owed him favors. One name kept coming up. Zane Russell, a former classmate who'd turned his hacking hobby into a legitimate security business. If anyone could help Ryan gather evidence, it would be Zane. As midnight approached, Ryan stood at his bedroom window, looking out at the town that had witnessed his humiliation. Soon, they'd witness something else entirely. Melissa wanted to make him attend her wedding. Fine. He'd be there, and he'd bring a storm with him. The next morning dawned crisp and clear. Ryan arrived at his garage early, mind focused on the task ahead. He'd barely unlocked the door when a familiar voice called out, "Ryan, got a minute?" He turned to find Sylvia Choi, owner of the local diner, hurrying across the street. Her expression spelled trouble. "What's wrong?" "It's Melissa. She was at the diner last night with Aaron Grant, making quite a scene." Sylvia glanced around before continuing. They were arguing about money, something about payments and promises. Aaron kept saying he'd take care of it before the wedding. Ryan's expression remained neutral, but his mind filed away the information. "Thanks for letting me know. There's more." Sylvia bit her lip. Daniel came in right after they left. He was drunk, rambling about how his father's threatening to cut him off if he goes through with the wedding. Said something about Melissa being damaged goods. Perfect. The pieces were falling into place faster than Ryan had anticipated. He spent the morning working on cars, his actions automatic while his mind plotted. Around noon, Zane Russell called. "Got those security cameras you asked about," Zane said without preamble. "High-end stuff, totally untraceable. When do you want them installed?" "Tonight. Grant's bar has a blind spot in the back alley. Start there." "You sure about this, Ryan? Once we start, there's no going back." Ryan thought about the invitation, about Melissa's smug note. "I'm sure. Get it done." The day progressed, each hour bringing new information through Ryan's network of contacts. By closing time, he had a clear picture of the players in this drama. Melissa, juggling relationships with both Daniel and Aaron. Daniel, drowning in debt despite his family's wealth. And Aaron, using his bar as a front for less legal enterprises. That night, as he reviewed Zane's first batch of surveillance footage, Ryan allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The camera had captured Melissa and Aaron in a heated embrace, their conversation picked up by sensitive microphones. "What about Daniel?" Aaron's voice was thick with longing. "He's a means to an end." Melissa's laugh was cruel. "Once we're married, his money is as good as ours, and Daddy Dearest won't be able to stop it." Ryan switched off the footage, his path clear. He'd attend the wedding, all right. But first, he had a meeting to arrange with Edgar Monroe, Daniel's disapproving father. The old man deserved to know exactly what kind of woman his son planned to marry. Milo padded over, resting his head on Ryan's knee. Outside, Evergreen Hills slept, unaware of the storm brewing in their midst. Ryan scratched his dog's ears, his voice soft but determined. "They're about to learn, boy. Nobody betrays us and walks away clean. Nobody." The security footage played on Ryan's laptop, its blue glow illuminating his focused expression. Grant's bar appeared on screen, the timestamp showing 2:43 am. A figure moved through the back entrance. Zane Russell, installing the last camera. Signals clean. Zane's voice crackled through Ryan's earpiece. You'll have eyes and ears on everything that happens in that alley. Good. Ryan leaned back in his chair. What about the other equipment? All set. I've got feeds from the bar's interior cameras too. Grant's security system was a joke to hack. Zane chuckled. Want me to set up the remote access now? Do it. Ryan pulled up another window on his screen, displaying Edgar Monroe's private contact information. I've got another task for you after. Need everything you can find on Daniel's finances. Already ahead of you. Rapid clicks sounded on Zane's end. Man's drowning in debt. Multiple mortgages, failed investments, gambling losses at Grant's illegal games. He's burning through his trust fund faster than his father can replenish it. Perfect ammunition for the meeting I've planned. Ryan had chosen his moment carefully. Edgar Monroe would be at his country club tomorrow afternoon, alone in his private study as usual. The next day, Ryan dressed in a crisp button-down and slacks, looking every inch the successful businessman. He drove his restored '67 Mustang to the country club, knowing appearances mattered in this world of old money and older prejudices. The club's security recognized him. He'd maintained their fleet of golf carts for years. They waved him through without question. Ryan found Edgar exactly where he expected, nursing a scotch in his book-lined sanctuary. Mr. Monroe, Ryan's voice cut through the quiet. We need to talk about your son's engagement. Edgar looked up sharply, his weathered face showing surprise rather than anger. How did you get in here? Same way your future daughter-in-law gets into Aaron Grant's backroom. Ryan placed a manila envelope on the desk. The difference is, I'm here to prevent a disaster. She's just creating one. Edgar's hand trembled slightly as he opened the envelope. Photos spilled out, Melissa with Aaron. Transcripts of their conversations. Bank statements showing suspicious transfers. Ryan watched the older man's face darken with each new revelation. These are authenticated? Edgar asked, voice tight. Everyone. Ryan sat without invitation. Your son's being played, Mr. Monroe. Melissa and Aaron have been planning this for months. They'll drain him dry, destroy your family's reputation, and disappear with everything they can grab. Edgar took a long drink, his knuckles white around the glass. Why show me this? Why not go to the police? Because you have more to lose than I do. Ryan's voice hardened. And because revenge tastes better when it's served by family. Hours later, Ryan sat in his garage office, reviewing his plan. Edgar had agreed to help, not out of kindness but necessity. The Monroe family name meant everything to him, and Melissa threatened to tarnish it beyond repair. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Peter, looking troubled. Aaron's guys are asking questions around town, he said without preamble. They're trying to dig up dirt on you. Ryan smiled coldly. Let them dig. My hands are clean. That's not all. Peter lowered his voice. They roughed up Timmy Cho at the diner when he wouldn't talk. Sylvia's pretty shaken up. Ryan's expression darkened. Timmy was just a kid, barely 17. Time to accelerate things. He pulled out his phone, dialing Zane. How fast can you get those cameras live streaming? Give me an hour. Why? Aaron likes to play poker. Let's show him what a real gambler looks like. That night, Ryan watched through the surveillance feeds as Aaron conducted his illegal game. The cameras caught everything. Marked cards, rigged deals, cash changing hands under the table. Most importantly, they caught Melissa visiting between hands, whispering promises in Aaron's ear while his opponents lost thousands. Ryan compiled the footage meticulously, building a case that would destroy both Aaron's operation and Melissa's carefully constructed facade. But he wasn't ready to use it. Not yet. First, he needed to ensure maximum damage. The next week passed in a blur of preparation. Ryan gathered more evidence, made strategic alliances, and watched as his targets grew increasingly paranoid. Aaron's thugs became more aggressive, pressuring locals for information about Ryan's activities. They didn't realize every threat, every act of intimidation, just added to the evidence pile. Finally, it was time for Phase 2. Ryan drove to Edgar's estate, where the old man waited with a team of high-powered lawyers. "Everything's in place," Edgar announced. "The prenuptial agreement, the trust fund restrictions, the business audits. It's all ready. The moment they make a move, we'll have them." "And Daniel?" Ryan asked. Edgar's face hardened. "My son needs to learn actions have consequences. Let him face the humiliation. Maybe then he'll grow up." Ryan nodded, satisfied. The pieces were falling into place. Soon, Melissa would learn what happened when she underestimated him. She thought him weak because he preferred honest work and a simple life. She'd mistaken his patience for passivity. That night, as he worked late in his garage, Aaron himself showed up. The bar owner swaggered in, reeking of cheap cologne and expensive whiskey. "Heard you've been asking questions," Aaron slurred. "Making trouble. That's not healthy, Ryan." Ryan didn't look up from the engine he was working on. "Neither is stealing another man's wife. Melissa came to me." Aaron stepped closer, trying to intimidate. "Said you couldn't satisfy her. Said you were too simple." Ryan's hand tightened on his wrench. "Simple enough to install cameras in your bar. Simple enough to record every crook game you've run." The color drained from Aaron's face. "You're bluffing. Check your phone." Aaron pulled out his device. The video played. Him cheating at cards, accepting bribes, meeting Melissa in the back room. His hand shook. "This is just a taste," Ryan said quietly. "Walk away now, or I'll bury you both." "You think you can threaten me?" Aaron's voice cracked. "I own this town." "No." Ryan finally turned, his eyes cold. "You just rent space here, and your lease is about to expire." After Aaron stumbled out, Ryan made another call to Zane. "Start uploading the files. All of them." "You sure? Once this gets out." "That's the point." Ryan watched through the window as Aaron's car swerved down the street. Time to show them what a simple man can do. Morning light spilled across the manicured lawns of the Monroe estate. Workers scurried about, setting up chairs and decorations for the afternoon ceremony. Ryan watched from his parked car, noting the increasing tension among the staff. His phone buzzed. Edgar Monroe calling. "It's done," the older man said without greeting. "The evidence has been distributed to all the right people, police, journalists, business associates. They're just waiting for my signal." "Good." Ryan checked his watch. "Remember, timing is everything." "I haven't forgotten." Edgar's voice hardened. "I've spent decades building this family's reputation. I won't let them destroy it." Ryan ended the call, his mind drifting to the envelope in his jacket pocket. Inside were copies of bank statements showing Melissa's offshore accounts, records of her meetings with Aaron, proof of their planned deception. Each document represented another nail in her coffin. Guests began arriving, filling the gardens with expensive suits and dresses. Ryan recognized faces from his past, people who'd whispered behind his back when Melissa left him, who'd smiled at his humiliation. Today, those smiles would fade. He made his way to the garden gazebo, where Edgar waited. The older man looked distinguished in his tuxedo, but his eyes betrayed his anger. "The priest has been informed," Edgar muttered. "He'll pause at the right moment." Ryan nodded, scanning the crowd. He spotted Peter near the back, ready to record everything on his phone. Zane had hacked into the venue's security cameras, ensuring nothing would be missed. The wedding march began. Guests stood as Melissa appeared, radiant in white. Ryan had to admit, she played her part well. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw him, but she maintained her composure. The ceremony proceeded according to plan. The priest spoke of love and fidelity, each word dripping with irony. When he reached the crucial moment, if anyone objects to this union, Edgar rose. I object. His voice boomed across the garden. And I have proof of why this marriage cannot proceed. Chaos erupted. Daniel jumped up, face red with anger. Father, what are you doing? Saving you from yourself. Edgar pulled out his phone, projecting images onto the large screen meant for wedding photos. Look at your bride, son. Really look at her. The screen filled with surveillance footage. Melissa and Aaron in intimate embraces, planning their scheme, laughing about Daniel's ignorance. Bank statements appeared, showing money movements between accounts. Finally, transcripts of their conversations played through the speakers. He's just a stepping stone, Melissa's recorded voice echoed. Once we're married, his money is ours. The color drained from Daniel's face. He turned to Melissa, who had frozen in place. Is this true? Daniel, I can explain. She reached for him, but he recoiled. Don't touch me. His voice shook. The wedding's off. Guests began leaving in droves, phones already spreading the scandal across social media. Ryan stayed put, watching as Melissa's perfect world crumbled around her. She spotted him then, fury replacing shock. You did this. You couldn't stand to see me happy. Happy? Ryan's laugh was cold. You've never been happy, Melissa. You're just greedy. You think this changes anything? She stepped closer, voice low. I still won. I still left you in the dust. Did you? Ryan pulled out one final envelope. Check your accounts. All of them. Melissa's hands trembled as she read the documents. Her offshore accounts drained, her safety nets gone, her face contorted with rage and fear. You can't do this. I already have. Ryan's voice carried across the now empty garden. Leave Evergreen Hills, Melissa. Leave, or the next revelations will be much worse. Is that a threat? No. He turned to leave. It's a promise. Ask Aaron what happens to people who cross me. As Ryan walked away, he heard her shout threats and accusations, but they meant nothing now. He'd shown everyone who she really was, shown them what happened when they mistook his quiet nature for weakness. Peter joined him at his car. That was something else. Never seen Melissa lose control like that. She never had control. Ryan replied. She just thought she did. Later that night, Ryan sat on his porch, Milo at his feet. In the distance, the lights of Daniel's mansion were dark. The evening news was already running stories about the scandal, about Aaron's illegal operations, about Melissa's schemes. His phone buzzed with a message from Edgar. Thank you. The family name is saved, even if my son hates me. Ryan didn't reply. His work was done, at least this phase of it. Melissa had learned what happened when you betrayed him, but the lesson wasn't over. Not yet. Milo lifted his head, ears perking at a sound in the distance. Ryan smiled, scratching behind the dog's ears. Don't worry, boy. We're just getting started. Ernest Grant's bar reeked of stale whiskey and desperation. Melissa slumped over her fourth drink, mascara streaking her cheeks. The wedding disaster had stripped away her polished veneer, revealing the bitter woman beneath. He'll pay for this, she spat, fingers tightening around her glass. That smug bastard thinks he's won. Aaron paced behind the bar, his usual swagger replaced by nervous energy. Keep your voice down. We need to think smart here. Think smart. Melissa laughed, harsh and hollow. Ryan destroyed everything. The wedding, my reputation, my future with Daniel. Our future. Aaron corrected, leaning close. Or did you forget about our plans? She glared at him. Hard to forget when they're splashed all over town. Your illegal poker games, our meetings. How did he get those recordings? Aaron's face darkened. Someone bugged my bar. My own damn bar. He slammed his fist on the counter, making Melissa jump. But we can still salvage this. How? Melissa's voice was small, defeated. We control the narrative. Aaron pulled out his phone, scrolling through local social media groups. People in this town love drama. They'll believe whatever story gets the most attention. Melissa straightened, understanding dawning in her bloodshot eyes. We paint Ryan as the villain. Exactly. The bitter ex-husband who couldn't move on, the stalker who harassed an innocent woman, the man who manipulated Edgar Monroe with fake evidence. It won't work, a gravelly voice interrupted. They turned to find Daniel Mercer stumbling through the door, his expensive suit wrinkled and stained. My father verified everything. The bank records, the surveillance footage, it's all real. Daniel. Melissa stood, swaying slightly. I can explain. Save it. He collapsed onto a bar stool, waving at Aaron for a drink. You played me for a fool. Both of you. Aaron set a whiskey in front of him, maintaining a cautious distance. Look, Daniel, business is business. Nothing personal. Nothing personal. Daniel's laugh was ugly. You had an affair with my fiancée and helped her plan to steal my money. Seems pretty personal to me. Keep your voice down, Aaron hissed, eyeing the few remaining patrons. Why? Afraid your other customers will hear about your rigged games. Daniel downed his drink. Too late for that. Ryan made sure everyone knows what kind of establishment you run. Melissa touched his arm. Daniel, please. We can fix this. He jerked away as if burned. Fix what? My ruined reputation. My father's disappointment. The millions I've lost in business deals because no one trusts the Mercer name anymore. We're all victims here, Aaron tried, but Daniel cut him off. No, we're not. Ryan played us like cheap cards in one of your rigged games. And the worst part, he stood, steadying himself against the bar. We deserved it. After Daniel left, Melissa and Aaron sat in heavy silence. The bar had emptied, word of their presence driving away the regulars. Finally, Aaron spoke. We need to hit back hard. How? Melissa's voice was barely above a whisper. I know some guys. They owe me favors. Aaron's eyes gleamed dangerously. One phone call, and Ryan's garage gets redecorated. Maybe with some broken windows. Maybe with something worse. Melissa considered this, twirling her empty glass. He'll expect retaliation. Let him. Aaron sneered. Sometimes the obvious move is the right one. Besides, it sends a message. Nobody crosses Aaron Grant without consequences. The next morning, Ryan arrived at his garage to find shattered glass glittering across the pavement. Spray paint marred the walls with crude insults and threats. Inside, tools lay scattered and broken. Peter whistled low, surveying the damage. Aaron's work. His style lacks subtlety. Ryan stepped carefully through the mess, Milo following at his heels. The dog growled at the lingering scent of intruders. Want me to call the cops? No. Ryan's voice was cold, calculated. This is exactly what I expected. He pulled out his phone, dialing Zane's number. The security expert answered on the first ring. Already reviewing the footage, Zane reported. Got clear shots of 3 guys. Running facial recognition now. Send everything to my laptop. And Zane. Ryan paused. Make sure the footage shows them entering from Grant's bar. Within hours, the video spread across social media. Aaron's thugs, clearly identifiable, vandalizing an honest businessman's property. Public sympathy swung further in Ryan's favor, while Aaron faced increasing scrutiny from law enforcement. Brenda Frost watched the footage from her diner's kitchen, her heart racing. She remembered Ryan from years ago, before Melissa. He'd been quieter then, less hardened. Now she saw him differently, saw the steel beneath the surface. The bell above her door chimed. Speak of the devil. Coffee, she offered as Ryan settled at the counter. Please. He glanced around the empty diner. Slow morning. People are scared. Brenda poured his cup. Aaron's guys have been throwing their weight around. Timmy's still sporting bruises. Ryan's expression darkened. How is he? Angry. Scared. Trying not to show either. She hesitated. I've been meaning to tell you something. About Melissa. Go on. Last year, when I was still married to Jack, Melissa knew what he was doing to me. The abuse, the control. She knew, and she told me I deserved it, said I should be grateful any man wanted me. Brenda's voice trembled. Ryan's grip tightened on his cup. Why tell me this now? Because I want you to know you're not wrong. Brenda met his gaze steadily. Some people deserve what's coming to them. Their conversation was interrupted by commotion outside. Aaron stumbled down the street, clearly drunk despite the early hour. He spotted Ryan through the diner's window and charged in. You son of a... Aaron swung wildly, but Ryan was ready. The fight was brief and brutal. Aaron's drunken attacks met Ryan's precise responses. When it ended, Aaron lay groaning on the diner floor, blood streaming from his nose. Consider this a warning, Ryan said quietly. Next time won't be so gentle. Brenda watched him leave, understanding dawning. Ryan wasn't just seeking revenge. He was dismantling a corrupt system piece by piece, and somehow she'd become part of his plan. The next few days brought more revelations. Anonymous tips led police to evidence of Aaron's illegal gambling operation. Health inspectors discovered violations at his bar. Tax auditors began investigating his finances. Melissa, meanwhile, spiraled further. Her attempts to salvage her reputation backfired as more people came forward with stories of her manipulation and cruelty. Former friends distanced themselves, leaving her increasingly isolated. Ryan watched it all unfold from his garage, now repaired and busier than ever. The vandalism had only increased community support. Even Timmy Cho stopped by, sporting a black eye but eager to learn about cars. You're good at this, Timmy observed as Ryan demonstrated an engine repair. Teaching, I mean. Some people deserve a chance to learn. Ryan handed him a wrench. Others deserve to learn harder lessons. The deeper meaning wasn't lost on Timmy. He'd seen firsthand how Ryan handled enemies, not with brute force alone, but with tactics that left them no escape. Later that night, Peter brought more news. Aaron's trying to frame you for the Miller garage fire. Ryan nodded, unsurprised. Let him try. You knew he would. I counted on it. Ryan pulled up surveillance footage on his laptop. Watch. The video showed Aaron meeting with his thugs, planning the frame job in detail. Their voices were crystal clear, their intentions explicit. This is going to destroy him, Peter realized. That's the point. Ryan's smile held no warmth. Some men dig their own graves. I just make sure they lie in them. Melissa's hands shook as she poured another drink, spilling expensive scotch across her marble countertop. The mansion felt emptier now, its luxurious rooms taunting her with memories of the life she'd almost secured. You're making a mess, Aaron growled from the doorway, his face still bruised from his encounter with Ryan, his ego even more damaged. Like you haven't made enough of those. She shot back. This was supposed to be foolproof. Marry Daniel, secure the money, start fresh somewhere else. Instead, I'm trapped here, watching everything fall apart. You think I'm happy about this? Aaron stalked closer. My bar is being investigated. The poker games are finished. Even my regular customers won't look me in the eye anymore. Poor Aaron, Melissa mocked. Worried about your precious reputation. At least you still have a business. I have nothing. Their argument escalated, voices echoing through empty halls. Neither noticed the small device blinking in the corner, another of Zhang's cameras, recording every bitter word. Across town, Edgar Monroe sat in his study, watching the feed on his tablet. Ryan sat opposite him, both men drinking aged bourbon as they observed their targets self-destruct. She's unraveling faster than expected, Edgar noted, his aristocratic features pulled into a frown. And Aaron, he's dangerous when cornered. That's the point. Ryan set down his glass. Pressure reveals true character. They're showing exactly who they are. Daniel won't speak to me, Edgar admitted. He says I betrayed him by exposing the truth. He'll understand eventually. Some lessons hurt more than others. Edgar's phone buzzed, another crisis demanding attention. Ryan left him to his family duties, driving back to his garage where Brenda waited. She'd been spending more time there lately, bringing food and conversation. Today, she looked troubled. "I need to tell you something," she said as Ryan settled behind his desk. "Before all this started, Aaron tried to blackmail me. He had photos of me meeting with Zane, threatening to tell you I was conspiring with my ex-husband." "I know." Ryan didn't look up from his monitors. "You think I didn't investigate everyone in my circle? The photos were staged. Aaron hired Zane to approach you, thinking he could use your past against us. Why didn't you say anything?" "Because you needed to choose sides on your own." Now he met her gaze. "Fear makes people predictable. Freedom to choose makes them reliable." Their conversation paused as movement on the bar feeds caught their attention. Melissa and Aaron had found paper and pen, scribbling notes. Another argument. Their fights had become public spectacles, recorded and shared across social media. Ryan watched each new video spread, understanding how humiliation could break even the strongest facades. Meanwhile, Aaron's desperation reached new heights. His hired muscle began targeting Ryan's allies. Peter's hardware store was vandalized. Zane reported attempts to hack his systems. Brenda received threatening phone calls. Ryan responded. Each act of intimidation was recorded, documented, and leaked to authorities. The out-of-town muscle found their criminal records exposed, their presence reported to parole officers. One by one, they abandoned Aaron, leaving him more isolated than ever. Melissa's charity gala was her last attempt at social redemption. She'd rented the mansion's ballroom to local organizations, promising generous donations. The guest list included Evergreen Hills' most influential citizens, assuming any would show. Ryan watched the preparations from his garage, where Peter and Brenda helped coordinate their response. "Flyers are ready," Peter reported, holding up a stack of glossy papers. Each detailed Melissa's history of manipulation, complete with testimonials from her victims. "These'll hit hard," Brenda added. "Security?" Ryan asked. "Minimal," Brenda confirmed. She can't afford professional guards anymore. Just a few of Aaron's regular thugs. "Perfect." Ryan checked his watch. "Remember the timing. We wait until the cameras arrive." The gala began at sunset. A handful of guests trickled in, mostly curiosity seekers and social climbers desperate for any invitation. Melissa played hostess, her smile brittle as she greeted each arrival. Ryan's team moved quietly through the crowd. Peter distributed flyers while Brenda engaged guests in quiet conversations, sharing personal stories of Melissa's cruelty. The whispers spread, faces turned away, and within an hour, the ballroom began to empty. Melissa noticed too late. She rushed to stop guests from leaving, her composure cracking. "Please, you don't understand. These are lies. Like you lied about helping me." Brenda stepped forward, voice clear. "Like you lied to Daniel, to Ryan, to everyone who trusted you." Reporters appeared, cameras rolling as Melissa's carefully orchestrated evening imploded. She spotted Ryan near the entrance, his expression cold and satisfied. You ruined everything," she screamed, mascara running. "No, Melissa." Ryan caught her wrist easily when she lunged. "You did that yourself." The scene played out across local news, the failed socialite's meltdown captured in high definition. But Ryan wasn't finished. As Melissa retreated to her mansion, Zane launched the final phase of their plan. "Offshore accounts accessed," he reported via phone. "Moving funds now." Ryan watched his laptop screen as millions disappeared from Melissa's secret accounts, money she'd stolen from various lovers, including Daniel, vanishing into untraceable donations to legitimate charities. Aaron arrived at the mansion an hour later, drunk and raging. "You stupid. You've destroyed us both." Their argument spilled onto the front lawn, recorded by dozens of phones. Aaron revealed their entire scheme, confirming every accusation Ryan had made. By morning, the videos were viral. Daniel, watching from a cheap motel room, finally understood the full scope of their deception. He called his father, voice breaking. "You were right. About everything." Ryan received the news from Edgar with quiet satisfaction. The pieces had fallen perfectly into place. Aaron's bar faced closure, his illegal operations exposed beyond doubt. Melissa's reputation was destroyed, her wealth gone, her social connections severed. Brenda found Ryan in his garage that night, working on an engine despite the late hour. "It's done, isn't it?" "Almost." He wiped his hands on a rag. "They still haven't learned their final lesson." "Which is?" "That actions have consequences." Ryan's voice was steel. "And some debts can never be repaid." As if on cue, his phone buzzed with a message from Zane. Aaron had been caught on camera discussing plans to frame Ryan for arson. The evidence was damning, irrefutable. "Send it to the police," Ryan instructed. "All of it." The next morning, officers arrested Aaron outside his bar. The charges were numerous: attempted arson, conspiracy, assault, illegal gambling operations. His protests fell on deaf ears as he was led away in handcuffs. Melissa watched the arrest from her mansion's window, understanding finally hitting her. She was alone. No allies, no money, no future in Evergreen Hills. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Leave town. Never return. This is your only warning." She recognized Ryan's style. Direct, unbending, final. Within hours, she was gone, leaving behind only echoes of her deception. Ryan stood outside his garage that evening, watching the sun set on a changed Evergreen Hills. Brenda joined him, her presence comfortable in the growing dark. "What now?" she asked. "Now." Ryan's smile held no warmth. "Now they understand what happens when they mistake kindness for weakness." The town would recover, he knew, but it would never forget the lesson he'd taught them all. Betrayal carried a price, and Ryan Holton always collected his debts. The cabin stood isolated among dense trees, far from Evergreen Hills' prying eyes. Inside, Melissa paced the confined space, her clothes dirty and wrinkled. 24 hours had passed since she'd followed the trail of breadcrumbs Ryan had laid. Documents hinting at hidden millions, coordinates leading to this remote location. Her phone lay useless on the table, no signal bars in sight. The windows, reinforced with steel bars, mocked her attempts at escape. Each hour stripped away another layer of her carefully constructed facade. Through hidden cameras, Ryan observed her deterioration from his garage office. Brenda stood behind him, watching the feeds with a mixture of horror and satisfaction. "How long will you keep her there?" she asked. "Until the lesson sinks in." Ryan's voice carried no emotion. 3 days should do it." The cameras caught Melissa's increasing desperation. She ransacked the cabin's sparse furnishings, searching for anything useful. She sat in a corner, talking to herself, jumping at shadows. "You're not worried she'll hurt herself?" Peter asked, bringing coffee. "The cabin's designed to prevent that." Ryan switched camera views. "Besides, physical pain isn't the point. This is about breaking her mind." In the cabin, Melissa's composure crumbled. Memories haunted her, faces of those she'd betrayed, lives she'd ruined for personal gain. Without distractions or escape routes, she faced her true reflection for the first time. "I get it now," she screamed at the walls, knowing Ryan must be watching. "You've made your point." But no response came. The cabin remained silent except for her ragged breathing and occasional sobs. Meanwhile, Ryan's surveillance network tracked Aaron's situation in prison. His attempts to maintain a tough image backfired spectacularly. Other inmates, hearing rumors he cooperated with authorities, made his life increasingly difficult. "Latest report from my contact inside." Zane's voice crackled through the speaker. "Aaron got jumped in the yard yesterday. Nothing fatal, but he won't be showing his face in public for a while." "Any signs he'll try to talk?" Ryan asked. "He's scared. The guys who jumped him made it clear, one word about your involvement, and next time they won't stop at bruises." Ryan nodded, satisfied. He'd chosen his allies carefully, ensuring Aaron would have no safe haven, even behind bars. Brenda approached Ryan's desk, expression troubled. This is breaking Melissa completely. That's the point. Ryan's eyes never left the screens. Some people only learn through complete destruction. She wanted to be the center of attention. Now she has nowhere to hide from herself. On the third day, movement stirred near the cabin. A hiker, exactly as Ryan had arranged, discovered the location. Within hours, emergency services arrived, finding Melissa in a state of near collapse. News of her ordeal spread quickly through Evergreen Hills, but instead of sympathy, her confession pages circulated online. Former victims came forward, sharing how she'd harmed them. Ryan watched from his garage as ambulances carried Melissa away. She caught sight of him as they loaded her into the vehicle, her eyes wild with recognition and fear. "You'll never prove anything," she croaked. "I don't need to." His voice carried across the space between them. "Your own words are enough." The ambulance doors closed on her desperate face. Ryan turned back to his work, but Brenda lingered. What happens to her now? Now she learns what it means to lose everything, not just money or status, but her entire identity. The confession she wrote opens investigations across 3 states. Her victims will take what's left. And Aaron. Prison has its own justice system. Ryan picked up a wrench, returning to the engine he'd been fixing. He chose his allies poorly. Those choices have consequences. By the next day, local news reported Melissa's imminent departure from the hospital. She'd be facing charges of fraud and conspiracy in multiple jurisdictions. Aaron, in solitary for his own protection, found himself with no way out. The day ended with Ryan on his porch, Milo at his feet. Brenda joined him, offering a quiet sense of companionship. "The town's changing," she observed. "They needed to see what happens when betrayal goes unchecked," Ryan replied, voice low. "They'll think twice before playing those games again." A few more nights passed, and Ryan got word that Melissa fled Evergreen Hills, her condition fragile, and her spirit shattered. Aaron's legal battles dragged on, each hearing revealing more evidence of his crimes. Ryan had proven he wasn't just the simple mechanic they once dismissed. He was the man who brought lies crashing down. He wasn't finished, though. Corruption ran deep, and Ryan had the patience to root it out, one scheme at a time. Some lessons took longer to sink in, but eventually they always did. Melissa's hospital stay ended with a forced conversation. Ryan had arranged a final confrontation. Security guards nodded to let him pass. She sat propped up in bed, restraints on her wrists. The sight of Ryan triggered visible panic. No, you can't be here." "But I am." He settled into the visitor's chair. "We need to discuss your future." "Future?" Her laugh bordered on hysteria. "You destroyed my future, my reputation, my money, my freedom. What else could you possibly take?" "Your delusions." Ryan placed a folder on her bed. "Your confession mentioned other victims. Police are very interested in speaking with them." Color drained from Melissa's face. "Those weren't confessions. I was hallucinating, desperate. Nobody will believe." "They already do." He opened the folder, showing her news articles. 5 investigations opened in 3 states. Your previous marks are coming forward, eager to testify. You planned this, the cabin, the isolation. You knew I'd break. Everyone breaks, Melissa. The trick is making them shattered in useful ways. Tears streaked her cheeks, but Ryan felt no pity. He remembered her cruelty, her calculated betrayals, her joy in others' pain. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. "Leave Evergreen Hills. Never return." He stood, towering over her bed. "If you do, next time won't be a cabin in the woods. It'll be somewhere much darker, much more permanent." She understood the implication. "You wouldn't. Try me." He left her sobbing, passing nurses who pretended not to notice. Outside, Brenda waited in his car. How'd she take it? Like you'd expect. Self-pity, denial, then fear. She'll run as soon as they release her. And Aaron. A message from Ryan's prison contact answered the question. Aaron had been attacked again. Nothing fatal, but the warning was clear. No place was safe. They drove back to the garage, where Peter waited with updates. Daniel's making the scene at clubs, hitting the bottle hard. Edgar's not sure what to do. Not our problem anymore, Ryan said. We did our part. Now he faces the fallout. In the following days, new revelations surfaced. Anonymous tips led to raids on businesses that had backed Aaron's operations. Corrupt local officials found themselves under investigation. Brenda watched it all unfold, marveling at how Ryan had orchestrated a thorough cleansing of their town. Evergreen Hills will never be the same, she murmured. That's the idea, Ryan replied. They needed to learn. Actions have consequences. Betrayal carries a price. The transformation of Ryan's garage into a community center took weeks of careful planning. What began as a simple training program expanded into something larger, a place where Evergreen Hills youth could learn trades, build futures, and escape the cycles of corruption that had plagued their town. Brenda watched Ryan instruct a group of teenagers in basic engine repair. His patience surprised her, though his standards remained exacting. You make one mistake here, he told them. It could cost someone's life. Precision matters. Attention matters. Everything you do has consequences. The lesson carried weight beyond mechanics. These kids knew Ryan's reputation, understood the deeper message in his words. Timmy Cho, now Ryan's official apprentice, helped demonstrate proper tool handling. His black eye had healed, but the memory of Aaron's thugs kept him focused, determined. Mr. Holton, a young voice interrupted. There's someone here to see you. Ryan looked up to find Edgar Monroe in the doorway, accompanied by Daniel. 90 days sober had changed the younger man. His eyes were clearer, his stance steadier. Class dismissed, Ryan announced. Timmy supervised the students' cleanup. They filed out, sneaking glances at Daniel, whose story had become a cautionary tale in Evergreen Hills. You've done amazing things here, Daniel said, surveying the converted space. Father told me, but seeing it. Why are you here? To apologize. To thank you. Daniel met Ryan's gaze. You could have destroyed me completely. Instead, you gave me a chance to see the truth. Truth is neutral. Ryan wiped grease from his hands. What you do with it determines your worth. Edgar stepped forward. We'd like to help fund the center's expansion. No strings, no control. Just support for something good in this town. Ryan considered the offer. The Monroe's money could help more kids escape the darker influences of Evergreen Hills. But trust, once broken, required more than good intentions. 3 conditions, he said finally. First, the center stays independent. Second, all financial transactions are transparent, publicly available. Third, you both take active roles in mentoring these kids. Show them there's more than one path to success. Agreed. Edgar's relief was visible. Though after recent events, I'm not sure we're the best role models. Redemption has value too. Ryan's voice carried authority. These kids need to see that change is possible, that choices matter. They discussed details while Brenda monitored social media updates about Melissa. The former socialite had surfaced in another state, attempting to rebuild her life, but her confessions followed her, poisoning each new beginning. Aaron's situation proved equally grim. Prison had broken him completely. Reports described him as a shell, speaking to shadows, jumping at noises. Brenda found Ryan in his office that night, reviewing security footage from cameras across town. You're not stopping, are you? Would you respect me if I did? He met her gaze. Corruption doesn't end just because we took out 2 players. It takes constant vigilance, constant consequences. The town knows that now. He closed his laptop, but his mind continued plotting. Evergreen Hills had changed, but human nature remained constant. Someone would always test the boundaries, always think themselves exempt from consequences. Ryan would be waiting, ready to teach them otherwise. His garage-turned-community center stood as both promise and warning, a place where honest work was rewarded and betrayal was punished, where lessons, once taught, were never forgotten. Timmy Cho's success story inspired others, and each new student left with a deep appreciation for integrity. The Monroes kept their word, funding expansions while maintaining transparency. Brenda started teaching business management, sharing her story of overcoming abuse. In time, the community center grew into a technical institute. Ryan's name spread beyond Evergreen Hills, the mechanic who broke corruption's grip, who taught harsh lessons about loyalty. Some called him ruthless, others called him necessary. No one called him weak. 10 years later, Ryan Holton stood at the window of the Evergreen Hills Technical Institute, formerly his humble garage, now a state-accredited trade school. He watched students file in, drawn from neighboring towns by its reputation for excellence and uncompromising standards. Mr. Holton. Timmy Cho's voice carried the confidence of a man who'd learned from the best. At 27, he managed the automotive program. The new equipment for the Advanced Diagnostics Lab arrived. Any issues with the installation? None, Timmy said with a small smile. I made sure they followed your specs exactly. Nobody wants to see your disappointment. Ryan nodded, recognizing the deeper meaning. His influence extended far beyond the institute. Evergreen Hills had transformed under his watchful eye, becoming a model of integrity in a region once known for corruption. Brenda Frost entered his office, carrying financial reports. Their personal relationship had grown alongside their professional partnership. She'd expanded her diner into a successful chain, teaching business ethics alongside management skills. Quarterly numbers are in, she reported. The institute's placement rate remains at 98%. Employers know our graduates don't cut corners. And the foundation? Ryan asked. The Hayden Foundation, renamed from Ryan's business holdings to honor the memory of his mother, provided scholarships for victims of domestic abuse and financial fraud. It supported new beginnings while reminding people that betrayal had a price. We've helped 32 families this quarter, Brenda said. 2 were special cases. Ryan understood immediately. Victims of cons similar to Melissa's old schemes. Even after a decade, his network tracked financial predators, ensuring swift justice for those who preyed on the vulnerable. Peter Harmon arrived next, age having silvered his hair, but not his loyalty. As head of security for both the institute and the foundation, he maintained Ryan's standards of vigilance. Got some news you'll want to hear, Peter said, closing the office door. Remember Maria Santos, the reporter? She was digging around about Melissa. Found her in Mexico City, living under the name Elena Torres, running small-time scams on tourists, until last month. Ryan opened the file Peter handed over, a police report. What happened? She conned the wrong person, local cartel boss's nephew. They found her in the harbor 3 days later. Silence. Brenda's hand covered her mouth in shock, while Timmy looked away. Seems fitting, Peter added. She never learned. Ryan's face remained impassive. Justice isn't about satisfaction. It's about consequences. She kept making the same choices. So did the world around her. And Aaron? Brenda asked, though she likely knew. Inmate records say he didn't make it. Peter hesitated. Prison fight. They're calling it self-defense, but it sounds like an execution. A decade of peace hadn't lessened the town's memory of Aaron or Melissa. Ryan's lesson had reshaped Evergreen Hills. Daniel, meanwhile, had built a rehab center, dedicating his life to helping others avoid his mistakes. Edgar Monroe often sat in the Institute's memorial garden, reflecting on the cost of redemption. Zane Russell arrived with the background checks for new instructor applicants. One has interesting connections, Zane reported. Nephew of one of Aaron's old crew. Might be looking for payback. Deny the application, Ryan said flatly. Send him our standard message. The standard message had become legendary, a file detailing the applicant's past activities, accompanied by a warning that meddling in Evergreen Hills meant facing the consequences. That evening, Ryan walked the Institute's grounds with Brenda. Students nodded respectfully, aware that their education carried more than technical knowledge. It carried Ryan's philosophy. Betrayal has a price. They passed the memorial garden, funded by the Monroes, where a plaque read, "Actions have consequences." Sometimes, Brenda wondered if they realized how it all began. With a mechanic, a scorned ex-wife, and a bar owner's greed. "Maybe one day they'll understand the full story," she said softly. "They understand enough," Ryan replied. "They see the results. That's what matters." Their final stop was the ethics classroom, lined with clippings about corruption's downfall. Subtle references to Melissa and Aaron's story drove home the lesson that betrayal could be a fatal mistake. That night, Ryan and Brenda sat on their porch with a pair of coffees. The lights of the institute shone in the distance. Peter's evening report came in. Another attempt to restart illegal gambling in a neighboring town. It had been swiftly shut down. The perpetrators warned of Ryan's reach. "No regrets?" Brenda asked gently. "None." Ryan's gaze swept across the property he'd once shared with Melissa. "Everything I've built, everything I've taught." It started with showing them what happens when they mistake kindness for weakness. In his home office, files still waited, new threats to address, potential problems to monitor, justice to maintain. Ryan's work would never end, but his impact would outlive him. Evergreen Hills stood as proof that personal revenge could forge lasting change. The institute would continue growing, each graduate carrying part of Ryan's legacy, skill, and integrity, plus an unwavering understanding of consequences. The foundation would keep providing support for those seeking honest paths. Ryan Holton, the mechanic who broke corruption's grip and taught his town a harsh lesson, sipped his coffee and watched the night settle. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Someone else would test his resolve, thinking they could outmaneuver him, and he would be ready to teach them otherwise. Actions have consequences. Betrayal carries a price. Some debts can only be paid in full. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.